Y'all, it's Ashley at Bookish Realm, and we are here with another Vlogmas video. It's Vlogmas day 21. 4 more days. Oh my gosh, it's day 21. We are killing it, y'all. We're killing it. We're killing it. We're killing it. We're killing it. This is so good. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I definitely am here with another top video. Of course. You're probably like, oh my gosh, Ashley, I told y'all there was going to be a lot of categories, okay? All right. I needed to get all my favorites list out of the way before 2021 because I want to start off 2021 with some new exciting content. I don't want to keep thinking about 2020. I really don't want to keep thinking about 2020. So as you can see from the title of this video, we're going to be talking about my favorite graphic novels, manga, and comics of 2020. You don't see something that I have gushed about, that I have loved. Probably it's gonna make it to my best books of 2020, the ultimate list. Okay, so these are ones that I really enjoy, that I would like to highlight in my reading experience, and ones that just did not make the top 20 of 2020, but they were still really good. So while you're watching, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, go ahead and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications if you want to see more content. So let's go ahead and jump into me telling you a little bit about this song, because clearly this is one of the infamous songs that we see with the Peanuts crew. And the reason why I chose this one is because it is a well-known animated work, but also a well-known comic. So I was thinking like, well, how can I relate this to comics, graphic novels, and manga? And I thought, well, this song is indicative of a comic itself, so why not go with this holiday song? Okay, so the song Linus and Lucy is a popular jazz number that was written by Vince Guaraldi. I'm probably saying his name completely wrong, and it definitely has appeared in a lot of Peanuts animated specials, which is where I have seen it. It is based off of the two siblings, Linus and Lucy, and it was originally on Vince's album Jazz Impressions of a Boy Named Charlie Brown. But of course, I think we all usually recognize it from the Charlie Brown Christmas soundtrack, and it is highly associated, or it is considered a signature melody. And this was released in December of 1964. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump in and talk a little bit about my favorite graphic novels, comics, and manga of 2020. As you all know, I am a huge fan. I know this is not a popular part of BookTube, but it is something that I'm passionate about, and I love it. So hopefully some of y'all are kind of getting some content out of this, or some recommendations out of this. I shouldn't say content, recommendations. All right, so the first one that I have on my list is Almost American Girl by Robin Ha, and this is one that I had randomly checked out from my library, and I loved it. This is about Robin's experience. So this is a nonfiction graphic memoir where she ends up moving from South Korea to Alabama, and it is so painful in some ways watching her go through that experience, because her mother literally uproots her, moves her to the United States, and then moves her to, of all places in the United States, good old Alabama. And she has a very hard time adjusting. She doesn't speak English. She has cousins, but they are definitely more in touch with their American roots than they are their Korean roots. And because of that, there is also kind of this kind of like wall between her and her cousins that she can't necessarily get past in some aspects. So she ends up feeling really alone, and she has to overcome that loneliness, and she starts making decisions about like what she wants to do in terms of her life. And it does some really interesting explorations of like life in Korea versus life here in America, and what societal expectations are, and how they're similar and how they're different, and how she wants to make sure that she is paying tribute and respecting a lot of decisions that her own mother made. And it is such a great graphic memoir, and I hope that more people end up picking it up because I learned a heck of a lot, and it's definitely one that I want to reread because it was just beautifully done. The next one that I have on this list is Justice League Volume 1 Origin. This is a part of the New 52 written by Geoff Johns. This was super interesting because, as you all know, New 52 was a way for DC to reboot their line, and this comes before the current reboot, which is Rebirth. So with this one, we actually get to see the origin story of how Justice League even came to be, and it was, when I say intriguing, it was extremely intriguing watching the characters try to navigate getting to know each other. There clearly is a lot of tension between Batman and Superman, and I think that this one is basically, like I said, it's just looking at how they meet. We don't really get individual character origin stories. The only individual origin story that we get is Cyborg's origin story, which I was kind of familiar with but not as familiar because I haven't read as many Cyborg comics, and a lot of time I just see him in reference to the Justice League and stuff that I've read. But I just saw some interesting attributes of characters that I had not seen before. Like, we all know I'm not a Batman fan. I'm not a Batman fan at all. It's just me. I don't take it personal. Batman is just not my hero. But I definitely did enjoy watching the Green Lantern, who I did not realize was a bit of a jerk. Like, he has a mouth on him that I did not expect to see, but it was there, and it was just interesting watching that whole dynamic happen and watching them kind of try to function together as a group, especially with Green Lantern being a part of that group and people having to shut him up at multiple times. And I put this on my favorites list because I love the artwork and the story was really intriguing for me. I think that this is a good place to start if you're looking for origin stories. I'm sure that there's better origin stories out there. New 52 is probably one of DC's like most hated decisions that they made. A lot of the stuff that came out of New 52 people just don't enjoy, but I think that New 52 was just, it was created for new readers, and I think more experienced readers in DC just don't like it because they're used to just being in a different framework when it comes to DC and comics. But this is definitely good for a starting point, and even for me, like a person who reads comics, it still can be overwhelming. And I read this at a time when I was just getting stressed out by prose, so I was like, I needed to escape, and this one was just fulfilling. I laughed. I was annoyed by Batman all the time. I liked seeing them kind of work together. I just thought it was well done, and by the time that I got finished reading it, I was like, oh, I definitely want to check out the next volume in the series and see how Justice League continues to form, because by the time you get to Rebirth, what ends up happening is that there's this element of time that is missing. So where we see the characters in New 52 and the relationships that they build, all of that disappears because a chunk of time is taken out, and the people who are in the Justice League don't even remember each other. So that's why I think that I'm so interested in why I enjoy this so much, is because you actually get to see these friendships form between this group, and then how they develop across time, and then what's going to happen as a result of them kind of being taken out of their situation and going to a state where they don't even remember each other. So this was a good one. I do have to admit that this is a good one. A lot of people are going to disagree with me on that, but I did enjoy that one. Okay, so next on this list I have Paper Girls Volume 6 by Brian K. Vaughan, and this one is the conclusion to the Paper Girls series, so I can't really talk much about it in terms of what it's about. But I just want to say about this is that this was such a great conclusion. It was good. It was good. I know a lot of people read Paper Girls and they're like, this is so confusing. It's science fiction. It plays with time. And I think anything that plays with time, in which even your characters can jump in and out of time sequences, it's it's hard to grasp. It's definitely a situation where you're like, what is going on? And then when you see characters interact with themselves on a timeline, even that starts to get confusing, because you're like, okay, well, who with who? And why is this happening? But Brian K. Vaughan like does so much of that stuff like intentionally, and it works. It works so well. By the time you get to the 6th volume, I think you're like, now this makes sense. Now all of this makes sense. Like everything comes together at the end, and it just made me appreciate the journey that these girls took together. I mean, a band of misfits in the 80s, you know, running their paper route, and then things go completely wrong from there, and they really just end up having to rely on each other, and they end up having to help each other work through their fears and their struggles, and they learn stuff about themselves in the future that they don't expect to see as kids. And he touches on a lot of things. Like for me, a big thing was like thinking about yourself at 12. Do you expect, or did you expect to be where you are now? If you think about when you were 12 years old, you're like, okay, now looking at myself in this age at 12, what was my dreams? Like, what did I want to do? What did I want to be? And, you know, it's that kind of like that conversation of like, what happens to us when we leave childhood? Why does that longing to just reach for the stars kind of like go away? Does the world bring us back down to quote unquote reality? Like it touches on a lot of different things, and it's phenomenal. It was a phenomenal conclusion to this series, and it will always be a series that I highly recommend. And I don't read a lot of science fiction, so for that reason I definitely think that this is a good one. In volume 6, which is chef's kiss. Next on this list, I have Amazing Fantasy number 15, written by Stan Lee. So one thing, I'm not going to get into this too deep because I'm not going to do it. But one thing that I really want to do going forward into 2021 is I was working on a Marvel project where I was following a creator who was going through what he called my Marvelous Year, where each year of every decade he was pulling out the top issues of that decade that you could read to kind of get a history and understanding of Marvel. And I was on it. I was doing the thing, but it is kind of overwhelming at some points, especially because a lot of the older comics are repetitive. But I want to go back to doing that in 2021 because I just want to show that some more love, because I loved it. Like, I absolutely loved it. It was one of my favorite projects that I was working on. It's definitely a passion project of mine. And of course, in doing that, I think I was 1960. Was it 1961 and 1962 or 62 and 63? I can't even remember what years I was doing. I'm so confused at this point. But in that reading, I came across the Amazing Fantasy issue number 15, which is the first time where we see Spider-Man, Mr. Peter Parker, as done by Stan Lee. And I just couldn't not include this on this list because it is such an iconic comic. It is super important to the comic world. It's super important to Marvel's history. It is what Stan Lee is known for. I think Stan Lee has created a lot of Marvel characters, but I think people closely associate him to Stan Lee, and I mean to Peter Parker's Spider-Man. And it was so fascinating seeing him in this, like his origin and kind of figuring out like his backstory and why he was even a part of this story at all. So Amazing Fantasy actually was like a series of its own, and what Stan Lee did was he used it as a way to kickstart his series into Spider-Man. So if you're interested in really truly knowing the origins of Spider-Man, I definitely would recommend checking out Amazing Fantasy number 15, because this is the first time you'll ever see Spider-Man on page. And if anybody is wondering, and it's kind of a sidebar, but if anybody is wondering, I do read these through the Marvel Unlimited app. The next one that I have here is another one by Stan Lee, which a lot of people are not familiar with the fact that Stan Lee also is responsible for the Fantastic Four, and I have been reading quite a bit of the Fantastic Four. I think I've read about 10 or 11 issues of the original 1961 run of the Fantastic Four, so we're talking really old here. And I was super excited about issue number 5. This is where we get to see Doctor Doom for the first time on page. and he is one of the best villains that I have seen so far. Even looking at these 60s issues, he's one of the best villains that I've seen. And honestly, he gives the Fantastic Four a run for their money. Like, they have such a problem trying to handle him, and I can see why. Like, he outmaneuvers them, he outsmarts them every single time. Every opportunity that he gets to do it, to fool them, they barely get away with defeating him. And they really don't truly defeat him because he always comes back. And he's just ingenious. I really do think that he has some of the best ideas to kind of trap the Fantastic Four. And I really saw that in this issue. And of course, with a lot of these issues, I can't really go into detail because they're like 26 pages. But they're really, really good. So the Fantastic Four can get kind of redundant as well, but it always gets interesting anytime I see the Submarina and Doctor Doom on page. And Doctor Doom is just he's a great villain. The next one that I have on this list is one that I've talked about a little bit this year, and a couple people have started reading it, which I'm happy to see, and that is Something is Killing the Children, issue number 1 by James Tynion IV. And he is well known for the work that he's done with the Backstagers, which I think a few people have read, but this is a new comic book that just came out this year, and boy is it crazy. This is a horror comic, and it's about something that literally is killing the children. So it focuses on this town where these kids keep going missing, and for the most part, from what I've gathered, because it's been a while since I read it, and B, I have not read the complete story arc for what would end up being volume 1 of the trade paperback. This one heavily looks at the fact that these kids are missing, and the people in the town are thinking that it's somebody that's kidnapping these kids. And we open up to a scene where these boys are having a sleepover, and one of the boys actually sees all of his friends killed by whatever this thing is. And then this woman randomly makes, with the biggest, boldest eyes, makes this appearance in town and says that she can take care of the issue. And I'm sure later on down the line in more story arcs we get to understand why she's even involved in this. But I think that people are fearful of her because she's an outsider, and people are not so kind to that little boy because of the fact that he's survived that night and his friends did not. This one, it's kind of on the gruesome side. Definitely be mindful of that, but it was so worth it. It was so well worth it. So well worth it. And the last one that I have on this list is the Avantgardes, and I'm actually reading, I think, what is technically the spin-off of this series right now, but I read the first 2 volumes this year, and it's so good. This is about a group of misfits that go to this theater or arts-based school, and they all play basketball, and and some of them are good, some of them are talented, and others are not. This one has great queer rep all throughout it, and I think that I just enjoyed the character development. I think the first volume definitely does lay the groundwork for a lot of what we see in the second volume, but we do get to know a little bit about all the characters, which is really, really cool. And this to me is more of slice of life. It's not heavy on the plot. Like, if you like Giant Days, I think that you would appreciate Avantgardes because it kind of follows that same energy, except this focuses a little bit more on a more diverse cast, and it's focused on a sport, and these characters all bring something different to the table. And I think just the friendship dynamics that you see and how they get to know each other and rely upon each other, and they use this sport as their common ground, is really, really cool. I mean, we get to see them deal with their family, we get to see them be in relationships, falling in love and breaking up, and it's just dynamic. And I'm hoping that whatever I'm reading now, which I'm thinking is the spin-off, is just as good as the first 2 volumes. But if you have not read Avantgardes, I definitely would recommend checking it out. Alright y'all, so that's it. Those are my favorite graphic novels, comics, and manga of 2020. Of course, I was like, well, you said graphic novels, comics, and manga, and there was no manga. Maybe because the manga is popping up on the best of the best list, which it is. the manga that I read this year was really good. So there's a couple volumes that really just blew some stuff out of the water, but these are ones that I rather enjoyed and definitely fit within this category. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in following me on social media, those links will be down in the description box below. If you are looking for ways to support my channel, that'll be down in the description box as well. And as always, I will be back with another video tomorrow. We're almost finished. Oh yeah.